You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again, and today we are going to have a true honor talking to an amazing person, Benjamin Cunningham. He's the author of a new book, The Liar, How a CIA Double Agent Became Cold War's Last Honest Man. You, Benjamin, are not a stranger. You wrote actually on this topic back in 2016, The Guardian. You wrote an article, how a Czech super spy infiltrated the CIA. Man, first and foremost, what inspired you to write this book, and why is this an important piece of history for us to dive into?
First of all, thanks a lot for having me. Really happy to join you today. I first I was a journalist living in Prague, and I sort of heard this urban legend, bits and pieces of this story. And I sort of, started making calls or sending emails, and eventually was able to find Karel, the main character of the story, Karel Koecher, and started meeting with him and sort of, started doing interviews, and things sort of snowballed, leading to sort of that Guardian article. And I had been a journalist long enough, to recognize a good story when I kind of stumbled across it. As for why I think it's important, I think, the Cold War, capital C, capital W, is sort of this thing that we all kind of hear about. Maybe people who are interested in it read books about it, things like that. And this, to me, was a chance to really go through this, this big event through the eyes of an individual person. I was able to get a lot of details, get to know some of the players, the characters on a pretty intimate level. And so rather than being this big history book, I thought this really, gave a different lens that I hadn't seen before in sort of experiencing history from a perspective that I don't see in many books that I read about these types of things. So that was kind of the starting point. And the further I got into it, the more I believed in that.
And the agent, Koecher, and his wife, this is
Hana.
This is a very intriguing story. Just the story before he even met his wife, and how he grew up, and his dad. I understand that. I believe he had English books and stuff. So like he had a very interesting mindset before he grew up to be an adult. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, exactly. So I think, as I said, this is a nonfiction book, but I really tried to write it in a way that was like a novel where you got to know the characters, And so through various ways, there was quite a lot of archive files that I went through, old declassified files from the Czechoslovak spy agencies, communist spy agencies. And I was able to piece together these background things about him growing up. He had a rough home life. He had some benefits in that home life, English language books. Growing up in the 40s and 50s in Czechoslovakia, that was unusual. But obviously that develops your language skills, which is pretty useful if you want to be a spy in the US. So there's sort of these bits and pieces that you're able to assemble that kind of construct the psychology behind a person that ends up doing the things he does. And he's kind of a rebel in his teenage years, kind of wild, kind of doesn't follow the rules. And you're able to, as you move forward through the story, that's kind of how he behaves as an adult. So, as I said, I think that the idea here was to try to have characters, well-rounded characters, true people, but well-rounded characters that the reader can kind of grasp onto. And if maybe you don't sympathize with them, but you at least, and maybe you do sometimes, but you at least are seeing things from a slightly different perspective, hopefully.
Once again, talking to Benjamin Cunningham in his book, The Liar, How a CIA Double Agent Became Cold War's Last Honest Man. This book is coming out August 26th, so y'all can get this real soon. And when it comes to Hana, she has a very interesting role in this because they end up making their way to New York, but she becomes a very popular diamond dealer, and she made friends with a lot of people in New York. How does that make an impact in this whole story?
Yeah, so Hana, Karel is the guy who actually is the spy, and Hana is sort of his accomplice, but not formally a spy. She gets involved. She gets involved with helping out. Sometimes she kind of passes notes and things like that to aid the operation. And she does. She becomes a diamond dealer. One thing leads to another when they first get there. As immigrants, they kind of meet some other immigrants who end up giving her a job as a diamond dealer. She travels the world, goes to Switzerland, goes to Israel, goes to India, sort of picking up diamonds. That sort of movement, in some ways, is useful in terms of sort of, sharing information with headquarters and things like that. They both basically get involved in sort of, let's say, high society in New York in the 70s on the Upper East Side of New York. They get involved in partying in that sort of neighborhood. They're involved in, spouse swapping parties. So all of these sort of things collide, sort of, diamond dealing, espionage, sort of 1970s type of partying lifestyle. And they're all kind of a mix that sort of, forms the backdrop of everything that's going on here and sort of, tells you a little bit about the personalities of these people. And so Hana was, not a spy herself, but more than along for the ride. And certainly the fact that she was engaged in sort of an international business, dealing with, high-end clients and things like that, that also sort of, feeds their story.
When you talk about how Koecher was able to warm up to security services and grow that relationship to make a move, like how interesting is it for him to play both roles? And what was your reaction to hearing some of the details from him himself?
I think it's stressful, first of all, right? And I think this was a guy that overall, the kind of personality that it takes to do the things he did is pretty, I'd say self-confident is not strong enough, right? Almost overly self-confident. And so he has this, while he's living under this stress, he has this confidence that he's always going to be able to figure out a solution to the problem he's in. So I think it's twofold. It's sort of this slow building of tension because he's in these high pressure situations where he's lying to people and dealing with sort of sensitive materials. And then it's this sort of overconfidence that he has that he continually thinks, no matter how difficult the situation, that he's going to find a way to balance one side off of another and find his way out of it. So talking with him, I mean, it was really clear he still has these sort of, he's an older man now. I think he's turning 88 in the coming weeks. He still has these elements of his personality. So when he talks to me, I think he believes he's going to be able to sort of steer the conversation where he wants it to go. So these are the kind of things that don't go away when it's that much of a part of your personality. So talking with him was super interesting. You obviously take everything you hear from him with a grain of salt. And in my case, I was lucky that I also had this trove of documents, declassified documents, that I could sort of use to triangulate things a little bit. Not necessarily having to believe every word he says, being able to verify some of the things he says, and things like that.
There's so many twists and turns in the story that you follow, and I mean, from the Radio Free Europe to him going to pursue a PhD in philosophy at Columbia to studying Russian affairs on the side. I mean, it's almost like, it's like watching a movie, just reading your book.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think for me, I really wanted to write it in a way that it read like a story, like a novel, but that was true. And that was, when you go through, there's a lot of books about history, Cold War history out there. I went through all these archive documents. I went through something like 30,000 pages of archive documents for this. And you start assembling that stuff, and you have so much material or so many things. As you start to put it down on paper or on the computer screen, let's say, it starts to feel like you're just listing facts and data, you know what I mean, quotes and things like that. You have so much stuff. And you really need to take a step back and try and, put it together in like a narrative and a story. And that was like a goal from the beginning. And my editor, Clive Priddle, was my editor at Public Affairs, the publisher. Even on the first draft I turned into him, there were sections where he was like, listen, this section, it sort of reads like you're just presenting research, right? You did a lot of research. We believe you. And my goal was to tell the story, but you kind of drift into this on your own. So I'm glad it reads like a movie. I hope it does. That was really what I wanted to do, because I think, by focusing on characters and a story, I think, it's possible that people can get a better sense of what's going on in a Cold War tale than if you're just reading a raw, there's atmosphere and things like that, rather than just a raw sort of, old school history textbook type of thing.
Once again, true honor talking to Benjamin Cunningham, author of The Liar, How a CIA Double Agent Became Cold War's Last Honest Man. You can get it August 26th. I want to say thank you again, taking time out of your busy schedule talking to us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.